in the last video, we balanced and panned, and so the instruments are kind of easy to hear. But now we're going to go even further and use EQ to bind these instruments together. So the first thing I'm going to do is put an EQ plugin on every track. And for that, I'm going to go to EQ, EQ3 7 band. This is the plugin I'm going to use for every track. Okay, so let's take a look at the drums here. I'm going to solo the drums, and we can kind of analyze their sound a little bit. Okay, so these drums don't really have a lot of low frequency information. There's not a big thumpy kick. So I'm just going to bring my high pass filter in, crank it up to about 18 decibels per octave for the Q, and take it up to about 100 hertz. Now what this is going to do is when we start to process things further, there's some low frequency energy that is certainly in their room noise, and we want to just cut that out right away so that it doesn't become loud in the future. And next we will just kind of accentuate certain parts of the drum kit. Like I'd like a little more body to it. So I'm going to go to this low mid here. Maybe widen that Q. And I want those sticks to maybe come out a little bit more. It's just about playing with the sound. I'm not making any kind of wild curves or doing anything crazy. I'm not making crazy boosts or cuts or anything like that. I'm just kind of being gentle with the EQ to accentuate positive characteristics of the sound and take away some of the negative characteristics. So in this case, I have a little more body on the drums now. I have the sticks coming out when they hit the head of the snare drum or whatever. And it's just a little more well-defined. You can judge this by hitting the bypass button and kind of comparing the two versions. Let's do that. So this seems to me to be a little more focused and shiny with the EQ on. All right, let's move on to the bass. Now, the bass is an acoustic bass, and so we want to keep in mind that the finger plucks are important, and also that the volume level is going to change when the bass gets up into the high register. It's kind of a natural thing with the acoustic bass. Now for this, I probably don't want to put a high pass filter on. I don't want to lose the low frequency. As a matter of fact, I'm going to use the low shelf to boost that low end. Not by a crazy amount, just maybe 6 dB. And I do want to accentuate those finger plucks. So I'm going to use my high mids to maybe find where that is. Maybe around 3K or so. And then maybe bring out some of the highest overtones in the bass. It's hard to have too much high end. It's possible. And then maybe I'll cut out some of the muddiness in the 500 to 700 hertz range. A couple of rules of thumb. If you can cut before you boost, that's a good idea. If you can solve a problem by cutting frequency, that's better. And then you want to boost wide and cut narrow. So even though I'm violating that slightly in this track, the idea is still there. I don't want to cut a whole range of frequencies. It'll make it sound really ugly. And again, we can A/B that. And you're going to continue to do this with each track. You're going to be EQing. So let's move on to the tuba. Now, it's also important not to EQ in isolation. So I'm just showing you this in isolation right now with one instrument soloed. So you can kind of hear how the EQ affects the sound. But what we really should be doing is EQing in pairs, in groups, and in the whole mix. Because what can sound good when the instrument's soloed might not sound so good when the instrument is in context. Okay, let's bring the tuba in now. Now for the tuba, what I want to do is maybe cut that very low frequency range and boost the low mids a bit. And if I put both plug-in windows up together for the tuba and the bass, you'll see that these curves are sort of complementary. I'm boosting in one where I'm cutting in the other. Boosting, maybe I cut that there and boost here. So the idea is that they lock together kind of like puzzle pieces to represent the full spectrum range. And this is an example of cohesive EQ. And you would continue EQing the piano, the guitar, and of course the violin. A couple other things to keep in mind is when you are doing EQ work, make sure that you're on the right plugin, especially when you use multiple instances of one plugin. It's very easy to, have a plugin selected, but have the wrong track soloed and start to make adjustments. And sometimes you can even fool yourself into thinking that you're hearing those adjustments, but really you're on the wrong plugin. So be careful with that. In the next video, we're going to have the EQ finished, and we're going to go on to put reverb on the tracks.